The world is transforming, and so are the limits of any possibility. Once a simplistic and uncomplicated way of living is now being governed with devices. Gadgets, gadgets, and more gadgets. Who's on the driver's seat on this highway of unlimited assumptions? The one with the craft-to-device defense mechanism against the gadgets. Lucky are those who can see their enemies. The enemies are now a complex matrix of binary numbers. Diagrams, anagrams, and more diagrams. The subsets within the subset of this geometry impacting the maths of failure and the success. The success lies in solving the puzzle. The puzzle which doesn't require a gun to shoot or a complex engineering to fly several feet above the sea level. An obscure object in an unseen dark room. That is our enemy. Driven by a verbal command, accessing every zones of our complex living with ease, the artificial intelligence is transforming our world and warfare at an unimaginable pace. A maze packed in a riddle of an enigma, leading to a finishing line of modern warfare. Are we ready for it?
Hello and welcome to this episode of The Defenders, in which we will look at the new dimensions to warfare that comes from the areas of cyber threats and cyber security and artificial intelligence, or AI, which could dramatically alter your capability as a defender or as an attacker in all future conflicts. Because in the deep, dark domain of cyber warfare or artificial intelligence, and in the control rooms and the dark control centers, this new dimension to warfare could dramatically phase out the enemy's responses or cripple your responses if you are not sufficiently prepared for it. And therefore, in this episode of The Defenders, we will look beyond the battlefield into this new modern domain and explain with our experts how India should prepare for the challenges of cyber threats and artificial intelligence. Hello and welcome to this episode of The Defenders, in which we are looking at yet another dimension of a national security challenge which goes beyond the handheld and the conventional weapon and firepower which we associate soldiers, airmen, and sailors to have. This is your capacity as a nation to deal with the challenges of cyber threat and artificial intelligence, which is increasingly becoming the big challenge in future as the world is trying to move away from conventional conflicts and new ideas are being expounded. And we have two experts who will help us understand this element to warfare and national security, because they've done a lot of work in it. We have Lieutenant General Sudhir Sharma. Welcome on the show, sir. General Sharma is a distinguished army officer, no doubt, has had a great military career, has commanded some of the largest military formations of the Indian Army, but more recently, in his post-military life, he has become a corporate guru and is lecturing the corporate world on a number of management techniques which he had mastered as QMG, but more importantly has been also talking about artificial intelligence and cyber security challenges to corporates and the industry. And we have Subimal Bhattacharjee. Subimal is a corporate honcho, but now a consultant, and his area of understanding is largely in the area of cyber challenges and cyber security. So Subimal, I'll start with you. You know, the fact that China has an edge over us is a given in terms of cyber security. And some would say we started almost 2 decades after the Chinese to get our act together in the case of cyber security walls that we need to create. But there is a view that a Pakistan-focused, regionally effective strategy that we had worked on for so many years, and that didn't just show on the deployment of our land forces, which have been now reorganized to look at China also as a major threat, that so-called two-front threat. But the cyber threat, as you know, is multi-fronted. It comes from all over. It's hard to pinpoint where it comes from. And studies have shown that India has some cyber intelligence and offensive capabilities, but they remain regionally focused and essentially Pakistan focused. How can we very quickly turn around and try and exploit all the resources in the country, since we call ourselves an IT superpower, to help the armed forces and the country to cope with the cyber challenges to national security?
Thank you, Mr. Maroof. I think we have summed up quite a few things with the one statement in between, that cyber is not necessarily only dependent on one geography, and hence it can be something that we could have the adversaries from any part of the globe. But having said so, we have to understand that today the cyber security becoming a part of national security in most nations of the world, or I would clarify that more of the advanced nations see the cyber element of national security as a very, very important aspect, and it is something that is preponderantly overshadowing many of the other threats today that emerge as far as the security aspect is concerned. So having said so, same understanding happens even in India. You have mentioned about the Pakistan-centric or Western-centric approach that has been going on for a long time, which I would still think are very low-hanging fruits, or from a perspective of a overall major threat, I would still think they just fall into one corner. But the build-up that the Chinese has been doing for a long time has, on this space, is not only a worry for us. The Americans today, who by and large are the largest people using artificial intelligence as well as cyber warfare capabilities, are threatened today. If you see the report of the National Security Commission's artificial intelligence in the US that was released early this year, they went very deep into where the Chinese institutions, whether it is the academic institutions or whether it is the PLS specific cyber capability organizations and teams, they have seen that is the bigger threat, much more than what they would see the Russians in this aspect. And if you see, even in that report, they have looked at the North Korea and the Iran angle, where they have said that these are more of lower level adversaries, but not necessarily a national security threat when it comes to using cyber capabilities. So now, in this kind of a scenario, assuming that what the Americans are seeing and what they are proposing in terms of what the DoD should do, we have a lot of lessons to pick up. In fact, there are a lot of things that are very common. Whatever we may talk in Quad in terms of a very small aspect around the cyber security, but there is a larger national security interest that we have to go deep down in the next few months and years, so that we are on top of things.
Okay, so you've led me on to your next question, but I'll come to you. What is one thing is clear to me, I don't know if you agree with me or not, I think America is making, in a larger way, the same mistake that we made earlier. They're becoming too China-focused. The threats are there. I mean, you cannot rule out what Russia can do to America. The lights might just go off in Washington like it went off in Bombay a while ago. But Jalal sir, one small question, one bigger one. Smaller one is artificial intelligence. Briefly, just give us an understanding. how the military intend to use it. And the bigger question is, the Indian armed forces have begun an exercise to create structures and to put generals in charge of various projects, recruit people, and also have studies that are being carried out onto what are our options in terms of cyber threats and challenges. Can you explain?
Yeah. Maroof, thank you very much for that. First of all, let me start by saying that, in my opinion, the next war, artificial intelligence and cyber security are going to be at the heart of it. In fact, they're going to drive the next future battlefield. And I'll go on to say that the countries which do not dominate the digital domain and exploit it fully, they're going to be at the losing side of the war. And therefore, artificial intelligence is going to actually be the next generation of warfare. I go on to say that gunpowder, nuclear weapons, and third phase is artificial intelligence. That is the kind of importance I give to it as far as future warfare is concerned. As far as Indian Army is concerned, see, if you want to go for a network-centric warfare, where everything is dependent upon networks and the complete IoTs, artificial intelligence has to be at the heart of it. Because the kind of data which the the battlefield of future is going to generate is going to be beyond the human beings to comprehend it. So artificial intelligence is going to be used very intelligently and very in a large manner to run the battlefield.
May I just interrupt, sir? I've been given to understand by some very senior officers recently by their public remarks to say that we see the use of artificial intelligence more and robots and things like that more in the field of logistics than in war fighting. Your view?
I think what you're saying is right, but that is wrong. The focus of AI being only on logistics or robotics is, a very small part of the pie. Artificial intelligence is an overarching domain which is going to change the complete nature of warfare. We're going to think differently totally. The decision-making cycle is going to be dependent upon what kind of artificial intelligence the senior officers have and what kind of understanding they have of the battlefield. It's going to be nearly autonomous. You cannot wait for decision-making to take place. Artificial intelligence must generate autonomous decision-making in drones and fighting warfare. And therefore, subset of that is going to be logistics, decision-making, robotics, all a part of it. But if you look at the bigger picture, artificial intelligence should actually define military strategy. In fact, define national strategy. What he was talking about, that they are so closely interlinked. National security and defense strategy based on cyber warfare. Going on to the second part of the question, you said, in 2018, the Prime Minister had started what you call the Defense Cyber Agency and Defense Space Agency, and also the Special Forces Division. Now, there is a need to go beyond that. We need to build a cyber space command. And I'm told that the Indian Army and Indian Defense Forces are moving towards a cyber command, possibly based in Madhya Pradesh. That is the way to go. It is such a big holistic thing that all the three services, Department of Defense Production and the government must get together to build a cyberspace command, and which the Indian Defense Forces are moving towards. And I hope it fructifies very soon because, like you said, we are possibly a decade behind some countries and we need to catch up. But we have the wherewithal and the ability to quickly catch up if we put our things right to be able to become a dominant power in the artificial intelligence and cybersecurity in the future.
Yeah, very rightly brought out. So my one suggestion in that area to the armed forces would be that identify officers who have the aptitude and skills for it, not necessarily from the Corps of Signals or telecommunications, but who are naturals in this field. And once they are, then let them remain in that vertical and don't get them to move in and out and then make them generalists like a bureaucrat or a police officer, that today you are in the cyber command and tomorrow you are inching to command a strategic forces command or another theater command because you feel if you don't do that, you won't sleep well after retirement. But anyway, more of that later. Subimal, China has a strategy which is now well known, and that is the concept of unrestricted warfare. Unrestricted warfare will hit you in a number of areas beyond the military domain and ipso facto have an impact on your military decision making. Explain.
See, as we have touched in the earlier segment, that the threat today has gone much beyond specific targets around military. The whole issue of asymmetric warfare becomes far much more prolonged as artificial intelligence and related tools get into the cyber warfare domain. And so the Chinese see that assets that you have, which in our cyber security parlance that we could use, critical information infrastructure, these are their targets. This is what they try to do even during the Galwan crisis. If we try to observe, there were a lot of attempts on our critical infrastructures from that country. Now, debilitating and destroying such kind of networks also have an impact equally, possibly, what you can do with the kinetics. And that is where, where we are moving to, where artificial intelligence and as General Sharma has mentioned about, the autonomous systems that are coming into play. The autonomous systems today are getting even down as small as to a malware. So a malware which is able to take a decision once it is planted in the system and trying to alter its functionality and all, today could do a catastrophic activity. Let us even for a moment not try to think about, if it gets into our, say, the air traffic control systems and all. So these are the threats that are becoming a force multiplier with the usage of this kind of technologies. And knowing the way the Chinese operate, it is a nation, but the rogue elements or the mindset of trying to go beyond conventional means takes it to places where it becomes a larger threat that we can envision. And that is where we really need to start thinking and building up our capabilities with a far much higher budgets and far much higher grasp, with a kind of, you just mentioned about, you have to find out the right talents. The Indian forces have some of the best minds, some of the best thinking minds, who really can be something, of an asset in this category. So we have to start thinking much ahead so that, we are on top of all of this.
Okay. So I've argued for quite some time now that we need geek brigades, which means that the guy need not have a good haircut. He need not be very good with physical and marching skills. But clearly, he could, as in one of the Bond films, Q says, I could do more damage to the world before you finish your cup of Earl Grey tea. So we need those kind of people. Yes. But General Sir, I want to understand from you that, do you believe that there is a need to segregate the military's capabilities and response mechanism from the overall grid that exists in the country? Because Subimal just brought out that a bug could decapacitate an air traffic control. Now, if everything is interlinked, it's going to be much easier for the adversary to get into this, that, and everything else. But if they are segregated, and I can give you an example, if I'm not wrong, the ASCON telecommunication network, that was set up precisely to cater for eventualities when all else is down, that will work. Your view, sir?
I'll come to that. Before you come to that, I want to take on an earlier question which I liked, was that I totally agree with you that we don't require specialist officers to be there. I feel that we need people from outside to come into the armed forces. If Neeraj Chopra can come and do a javelin throw and be a Subedar of the Indian Armed Forces, we need a lot of young people from the, our IITs to be part of the artificial intelligence. They need not be all uniformed people. So we need a lot of officers, people coming from outside, supporting the Indian armies or Indian Defence Forces thrust for artificial intelligence like China has done. It's going to be a national effort, We cannot have a few officers doing it, but I agree there should be specialist officers, should continue. But we should also look from talent from outside to build onto that and build a geek brigade, and I would be very happy if that happens and continues. That's one. Now, as far as segregation is concerned, Maroof, is easier said than done. The way the whole national system is interlocked, it will be very difficult to keep the Indian Army or Defence Forces segregated or quarantined for it. What we need is an overlay. Redundancies to be built into it so that once they don't get affected so much. But otherwise, like you said, the complete railway network, the complete banking network, the complete power network, the complete air network, the entire system is so integrated that cyber security and artificial intelligence becomes a national priority now. And the defense forces become a subset of it. We can try and isolate them to the extent possible. But I think overall, we need to look at it holistically from the national point of view. And we need to build our national priorities and national domes in a manner that all of them get secured. It will be very difficult for us to break them separated because we depend upon the complete national power to fight a war, prolonged war. Look at the maritime domain. How can you, I do not know how it will be possible to do that, but it will be ideal, but possibly not possible to do so. Only to a limited extent we can quarantine them or keep them separate. But at some stage, there will be interplay, interlock, there will be overlap, and that's the vulnerabilities come in. We could defend against that. And therefore, our cybersecurity system should be so powerful and so artificial intelligence linked that we are able to defend ourselves in the future and do so. I just want to share a news with you that I just read that India has become one of the 10th countries in the cybersecurity rankings of the world. China is 33 and Pakistan is 73. So we hit the 10th position. We need to hit the first 5 to become a cybersecurity domain. That's a good part of it.
You're saying that we are ahead of the Chinese?
Yes, in the cybersecurity domain as far as the United Nations thing is concerned. I don't know how far that is true, but that's what's been said. But
I would find it a bit difficult to absorb.
See, the vulnerabilities are not known, Maroof. Sometimes, like you said, China was trying to do something in Galwan. They'll keep it to themselves. They're going to hit us when we are really vulnerable. They'll keep this safe. I don't know what all weapons they have developed already, what we have got to defend it, but they'll be only unleashed or shown their hand when we are very vulnerable at the time of the war. Nobody shows what they've got in the arsenal as far as...
Also, sir, a lot of these studies are based on what figures you're willing to give
Absolutely.
out.
What are you going to share?
And just like China's defense budget is always difficult to assess because they don't disclose where all the money goes. Same with Pakistan. Half the money that the Pakistan army eats up, we don't even know, but they're, squeezing on the Pakistani budget is a lot larger than we know. Subimal, India is the 5th most targeted country by China, and a China expert, Antara Ghosal Singh, has said this as part of a cybersecurity research by company FireEye. Your view?
Well, FireEye is one of the companies that looks into it, but there are a lot of other, large cybersecurity companies that give out, by monthly or 6 monthly kind of such reports. You see, China definitely targets us. There is no doubt about it. But where we stand, whether it's 5th, 6th and all, it's all very dynamic and, as much as we know. But the fact, Maroof, remains today is that slowly and steadily we have to move towards a regime that we look at all these aspects of, cyber security and in that manner, cyber discipline by, rogue nations as well as, these entities like China who create those problems. The world is very slow in going in that direction. Individually or even in groups, I would think that the focus today still doesn't carry much of a weight. Some efforts right now, of what happened in NATO and now to Quad to an extent. Say Quad is looking more at the supply chain side around and the critical infrastructures. I think that's a very, very good development and, we should jump on the initiative, whatever research fellows of funding and everything that the Americans have proposed in Quad, it's a good beginning. But on our own, we should put now a lot of funding and budget available to build up that level of capacity around the critical infrastructure protection and defending our own networks. But parallelly, we have to get entities beyond Quad to look at a certain disciplining treaty or something like that around cyber. There's nothing around cyber that is moving except, a Western acquisition that, China, Iran, Syria, they all pull in different direction. Why can't we bring that, legislation or a treaty like that looks at the cybersecurity aspect? We can look at the cybercrime aspect, but that is...
I think there's a problem there, and the problem is really, you can have any number of legislations, but it's very difficult to pinpoint who is putting the threat and who's attacking you. And that actually leads me to my last question, General Sir. As a military man, one of the areas you've spent the better part of your life training people and thinking in terms of what are your military appreciation will tell you what are the possible areas from which you could get the adversary to attack you. But in the cyber domain, it's very difficult to identify both from where the attack will come from and who the attacker is. So how do you define the terms of reference for any military outfit to press the alarm bells when a cyber contingency arises?
See, Maroof, the point, the issue here is that for a very long time, we've been fighting attrition warfare, where we say we destroy 100 tanks or destroy 20 tanks and we destroy so many people, that we are on the winning edge of the war. What if these tanks were not destroyed, but they were disabled, and they were not, coming onto the battlefield, or they were on the battlefield, but they were not firing? Or similar case with all the weapon systems or the airships or aircraft or various weapon systems, because the more we buy advanced technology, the more we become dependent upon the chip and the IoTs, and more they become vulnerable to attacks, and therefore they can be paralyzed. So what I'm saying is, in the next training future, what is going to happen is that we may have a lot of combat power which is readily available to us, but it is not working optimally. It has been paralyzed by decision making and things have been stopped it. So our first alarm should go in that our ability to fight a war where the cyber attack has become prominent. So we're going to build capability wherein we are sure that without communication breakdown and in a kind of maneuver warfare, we don't go into attrition warfare, but we look at breaking the will of the enemy, which can only happen by making sure that his weapons of destruction are weakened, paralyzed, and they can't affect and do that. So therefore, I feel that in every combat formation, there needs to create, like Subimal says, a cyber awareness team, which is able to determine when the cyber attack is building up upon you. And we're able to go into phase 2 and able to fight the war under the shadow of the cyber war and cyber attack. Okay. And I think Indian Army is training itself to be able to do so, that even when we are under attack, we are able to battle it out because we are aware of our plans, our orders are well given to everybody in advance, and we just go on and complete a task given to us without waiting for orders from behind. And that kind of training and that kind of battle groups have to be created for us to win future wars.
Very, very well brought out. In fact, Subimal will agree with me. It's important to draw the red lines and say that when the ingress is beginning to take beyond the first set of firewalls, that is when the alarm should go on. But we can have a separate discussion on all this. So thank you very much for your wisdom and your inputs. And thanks for watching until our next episode. Goodbye.